Hello, people. What is going on? Welcome. We have this last slide presentation, which I'm going to break down and go through for you, with you. Um, you should have those slides up and ready to go. So when I start, you are there. They are the slides I posted about 15 minutes ago in Classroom. All right. Just to reiterate, I get lost as to what class I already said this to and blah, blah, blah. So I just say it over and over just to cover myself. Third marking period, right? Third cycle is coming to a close today, I believe. Waiting to hear from Mr. Tahada on when the grades are submitted, but I believe it's today. Everything in there is in there. I've been saying that. I've been saying for weeks now. Keep checking your grades. I understand that there's a bunch of things going on, and sometimes you can't get things done in the time allotted. And I have no problem with that. You guys know that, and I've always been like that. So if you have done something late, it's no big deal. I'm not gonna, take points off for that or anything. But I don't know that you did it. You need to private message me to let me know that you have finished something late. And the way you know it's late is when you see the grade go in. When the grade is posted there, and you get a 0 or a 5 or whatever you get on it. And that's telling you didn't do it. Once that grade goes in, I don't go back to that assignment unless I have to, right? Because I've graded 95% of it. And there's only a few people that didn't do it or whatever. If you do it late, I don't keep going back to your specific stuff and checking. That's just it's not feasible for that many students. So you need to take it upon yourself to send me a private message as soon as you're done. As soon as you're done, hey, Graph, finish this a little late. Check it out. No big deal. And I'm okay. I'll tell you okay on the private message. No problem. I'll go right to it. I'll grade it and I'll put it in. So hopefully the grades are to your liking. And that's that. All right. So what else do we have going on here? I don't know what they fake mean, man. Yes, you are. That's okay. What I've also been saying is when I go live, I understand that in some classes there's only 1 or 2 kids checking in live. If some classes have 8 or 10 people going live, and that's fine. I have to go live just in case you have, hi Brian, just in case you have specific questions, right? I have to go live. The reason why I'm using YouTube Live is in case you have to get in touch with me right away, and that's fine. You can go, you could also, the reason why I'm using YouTube is because it automatically records and it automatically posts to the classroom. So yes, I only have 1 or 2 viewing right now. My last class, I had like 10 viewing, and I'm okay with that because when I go back at the end of the day and I look at the views at the end of the day, everybody sort of makes their way to it and they check it out and they click on it. Usually because I give them some decent information about the quiz or something like that, which I'm going to do today. So the views go up as the days go by, and I'm okay with you getting it done at your own leisure as long as you're getting it done. So yes, when I see 1 viewer live or 2 viewers live or 3 viewers live, I don't really care. I just assume that, people are going to look at it later, and I just play like I'm not live and I'm recording, and that's that. All right. So we are looking at the slides, and we are looking at integrated pest management. That is lesson 7. All right. So slide number 2 is the agenda, which you can look at your leisure. And slide number 3 is a review, which you can look at your leisure. That's a review from the pest lecture that we did just the other day. All right. So we have been talking so far about agriculture. And from March 27th, I believe it is, that was the first lecture in agriculture. So when we look at that, we did farming, we did green revolution, we did GMOs, we did irrigation, how water affects soil. So we did a lot of that. And last time we met, we talked about pesticides. So what we're going to do is we're going to talk about this one, and then the next time we meet, we're going to have a quiz. So I'll talk about that a little at the end of this. But right now we're talking about, all right, we had pesticides. We talked about how dangerous pesticides were. We talked about how messed up they were. And then we're going into integrated pest management. All right, what this is this is a process. So I'm on slide 5, all right? The slide 4 was just the objective, and slide 5 tells you what it is. Now we're going to call it IPM. IPM stands for integrated pest management. So IPM is not a single pest control method, but rather a series of pest management, evaluation, decision, and control. Okay, all that means is this is a process. IPM is a process. You can't just say, okay, I don't want any pests, so I'm going to spray this poisonous pesticide on my crop every year. It isn't going to work out like that. So you have to go through this process, this highly monitored and refined process, and that process is called IPM. All right. There's 4 steps to IPM. Set action thresholds, number 1. The second step is prevention, proactive prevention, it should say. Step 3 is to monitor and identify specific pests. And step 4 is control. All right. So those 4 steps are the 4 steps of IPM. You'll probably need to know those for a quiz. And the next 4 slides talk about each step individually. So moving on to slide 6, we see that there is an action threshold. That is the first one, to set an action threshold. All right. Before, and what this slide says is before taking any pest control action, IPM first needs to set an action threshold, and that is a point at which populations or environmental conditions indicate that control action must be taken. All that means is, if you know what a threshold is a point that you set that you don't want to go past. If you go past that threshold, then an action takes place, right? So if you have a threshold for patience, let's say I have a threshold for patience, and I have a patience level up to here, and people are testing that patience and testing that patience and testing that patience. Much happens in the classroom. If my patience threshold is passed, then I have an action, and I lose my patience, right? So that's what a threshold is. A point you get to where if you pass that point, an action takes place. So setting an action threshold is interesting in agriculture because they use 2 main variables. All right, they use the pests, I guess you could say the number of pests, and they use an economic threat variable. All right. So what it says on these next 2 bullets is citing a single pest does not always mean control is needed, right? Farmer goes outside, looks at his crops, sees a couple of caterpillars. Caterpillars are pests for whatever he's growing, let's just say hypothetically, right? So he goes out, he sees a couple of caterpillars, and he freaks out. Oh my God, I got pests. Oh my God, oh my God. And in the past, they may have hired a plane to come over and dump pesticides all over the whole crop and blah, blah, blah. Dude, relax. You saw 2 caterpillars, right? So that's sort of what we're talking about here. So there's that, and then there's an economic threat. We already know that a lot of crops, when you grow crops, when we talked about growing crops in the 40s, they lost about 7% of their crop to pests. And that was acceptable loss, right? That percentage will go up to a point where it's no longer acceptable. So if there's pests and they're taking 15, 20, 30% of your crops, that's a huge economic problem. You're not going to make any money doing that. So the economic threat is when the pests take away a large percentage of your crops. And the single pest thing means, look, we have to set thresholds here. And the thresholds are different for every pest, for every farm, for every different type of crop. All the thresholds get set in a certain way by this organization, right? And the thresholds will be like, okay, say the farmer with the caterpillars. The farmer with the caterpillars, maybe the threshold for caterpillars and on his land is 2,000. So if you can identify that there are over 2,000 caterpillars, then that threshold is passed, right? It also might say, okay, if 15% of your crop is lost to pests, then that is past the threshold as well. All right. So there's a threshold, and that threshold varies depending on which farm you're talking about and whatever. Okay. So that's step 1. When we move to slide number 7, slide number 7 is prevention. Okay. And prevention is the proactive step. So at the first line of pest control, IPM programs work to manage the crop, the lawn, or the indoor space to prevent pests from becoming a threat. All right. So what they do is they preventative measures, proactiveness. So when you're doing agricultural crops and you're doing this large land stuff, this can mean using crop rotation, right? So if you're using crop rotation and moving your different crops around, it's a little bit harder for insects to infest it, to pests to infest it because it moved. So it might take them a little longer to find out where that stuff is. And that may give you the time needed to grow your food. So if you're just putting the same crop in the same area every year, pests are going to know where it is. They're going to figure out like this is where we go. But if you're moving it around your land, if you have enough land to do that, then that's a way to sort of help prevent, right? You can also select pest-resistant varieties. So there are pest-resistant varieties of seeds, of crops that you can buy, and they're more expensive, but when they grow, they have pet sort of resistance built in, something that the pest doesn't like, some sort of bad taste that they won't do. So there's ways to do that. Also, you always see that. I remember I have a friend that lives in Delaware, like in farm chicken corn country. And whenever I would go down there when I was younger and we're driving past these fields, I'm like, dude, why don't we just jump out and steal some of this corn? It's like big, huge, beautiful corn. I'm like, let's just take some corn and go home and cook it, man. And he's like, no, you can't do that. He's like, what this is, so when you see a cornfield, the outer corn is like feed corn. It's like subpar, nasty corn. And it's put there sometimes because deer will come in and start eating the corn stalks. So the deer will come in and they'll feed on the crappy corn, and they won't get into the middle where the good corn is that you sell for human consumption, right? And then they also use that outer feed corn for feeding the animals on the farm. So it's not good corn. So that was interesting for me. All right. And then there's also other ways too, right? You can put a fence around your farm if the pests are bigger, like deer or like animals that come in and eat things. So there's a bunch of different ways to be proactive to prevent this stuff. And these can be very effective. They can be very cheap, and they present pretty much no risk to people and the environment. So being proactive in step 2 is very important. So now you have set action thresholds, like I don't need to do anything until we get to this point. You're not just sitting back, you're actually doing some preventative maintenance to make sure that these pests don't come in and don't want to, right? So then we move to slide 8. Slide 8 talks about monitoring and identifying pests, okay? So, or slide 8, right? So this is step 3 in the IPM. Not all insects, weeds, and other living organisms require control. Right? Some organisms are innocuous, which means they're not dangerous to the crops. Some are even beneficial to the crops, right? Like I know if you release a bunch of ladybugs in your garden, the ladybugs will eat some of the insect pests. So they're beneficial. So you see ladybugs in your field, you're okay with that, right? Some of these insects and weeds, they don't require control. There's a little bit here, there's a little bit there. They don't pass that threshold, is what they're trying to say here, right? So the first thing you have to do is you sort of have to identify what is a pest to these crops and what isn't a pest, right? So that's the identification process. And then, of course, you have to monitor. You can't just set a threshold. You can't just put in some proactive measures, put up a fence or do something like that, and then sit back and wait for the crops. You can't do that. You have to monitor. So that farmer that went outside and saw a couple caterpillars, he's going to go out. He's going to walk around his fields. He's going to start looking. He's going to monitor how many caterpillars he sees, how many pests, he sees, because he knows he's identified the caterpillar as a pest to his crops. So he's going to go out and he's going to monitor that, right? And if he sees enough of them, he may hire somebody to get a decent count and see if that threshold is passed, right? So monitoring and identifying pests is very, very important. When we move to slide 9, we talk about control, right? So now we're in step 4. So now we've set the thresholds, we've done the proactive preventative maintenance, we've monitored carefully, and we've identified what is a pest and what isn't, right? Now, once all of that stuff is done and it's not effective, so now the farmer's going out and saying, wait, I see more caterpillars. I see more caterpillars. Oh no, right? So now there needs to be some sort of control. There needs to be an action when those thresholds are sort of passed. So the first thing they do, again, we're not flying planes over, dumping poison all over the place yet. The first thing they do is they look for the effective, less risky pest controls. So they choose methods that are not risky or dangerous to humans, but can still be effective in certain situations. So one of those things they do is biological control, right? So we already talked about this when we talked about the bullfrogs, controlling the bullfrogs in the pond a couple of months ago. We talked about trying to control those bullfrogs using different methods. And one of the methods we tried was putting largemouth bass, fish, into the pond to kill the tadpoles, the baby bullfrogs, right? That was a way to biologically control the bullfrogs. You put them in and let nature take its course. They feed on that. That should control them, right? So same thing here. You can find biological control by finding natural predators, right? So like I said, the ladybug is a natural predator. I think the picture is actually of a ladybug. So the ladybug is a natural predator of a couple of insects, pests that can damage crops. So you can literally go like on Amazon or something and buy like 10,000 ladybugs. It's kind of crazy. And you can set them free and they'll live in your crops and they'll help control it, right? You can also find a lot of pests. You could also release a parasite, right? If a known parasite of these pests is identified, you can actually put this parasite into the ecosystem, and the pest will have this parasite in it. Parasites kill the host, right? So the parasite will spread through that population and hopefully kill those predators. You can also use highly targeted natural chemicals to disrupt mating. So if you have a pest, right, you can use pheromones. Pheromones are natural chemicals that are produced by animals that signal certain things, right? It smells, pheromones. And there are pheromones for mating. So when it's mating season, the male or the female will release these hormones, these pheromones, and the opposite sex will smell that and will it'll have an attractiveness, and then, time to reproduce. And there's different types of pheromones for different things. There's pheromones for aggression. There's different types of these natural chemicals that animals make. So if you can find and disrupt the pheromones, right, you can disrupt the pest mating. So you can change that targeted chemical thing, and instead of the pheromones for attraction that would cause them to reproduce, you can maybe have pheromones for aggressiveness or something like that, right? So you could stop them from doing it. That's what they're saying. And there's also mechanical control. That's just trapping, weeding, right? So weeds can be a pest. So if weeding, you see that there will be farmers that hire people to walk around and actually pull out the weeds. That's weeding, and that's a way to control it, right? So that's a mechanical control. Also trapping, if it's a big enough pest where you can trap in something. You see in this bottom picture on slide 9, there's that sticky paper, right? And you put that sticky paper down and it will actually, and the pest will go over there and will get stuck to it and die. So that's another way to control it. So there's mechanical control, right? Moving to slide 10. Here we go. If all of that doesn't work, right? So you've done all this, you've tried the biological control, you've tried all these different methods, and all of a sudden it's still not working. Now it's sort of time to bring in pesticides, right? And what they would do is they'll take pesticides, and the first step, still, they're not going crazy. The first step, though, is like, okay, we can't do this naturally. We need to bring in the poison. They will try to target spray, right? So they will say, okay, I'm looking at my crops, and all the pests seem to be in the southwest corner, right? There's no pests right here. There's no pests right there. There seems to be a lot of pests over in the southwest corner. So they'll target spray. They'll either go out with tanks and spray it manually, or they'll go out with tractors like you see in the picture, and they will just spray the area where they see there's a lot of pests, and hopefully that solves the problem. So they're still trying the best they can. They're spraying it right on the ground, right? They're spraying it right into the plant. So hopefully that won't spread as much in the air and stuff like that. If that doesn't work, and it is the absolute last resort, and none of that stuff is working, and you have been infested with pests, and you're going to lose a ton of crop, and you have to do something, then we go to the big old plane on the bottom picture there. The crop dusting is what I call it. It's called broadcast spraying, but the common term is crop dusting. And you see that the plane flies over, opens up tanks of pesticides, and that mist falls all over the crops, right? You've dusted the crops with this misty pesticide. And we already know the problems with that. We've seen that with pesticides, right? If the wind is blowing, if there's people in the area, we know that can be a big problem. But as a last resort, it has to happen. All right. Slide 11, just skip over it, says guided practice. Slide 12 talks about organic food. We talked about organic food a couple times, but we didn't talk about what makes it organic. What the heck does that mean? Oh, it's clean, but what does that mean, right? In order to be labeled an organic food, you have to have some certain things, some certain steps that you've had checked off. All right. For instance, in order to be considered organic food, you cannot have used any human sewage sludge fertilizer when you were cultivating these plants. All right. So, or animals. So, because you can have organic meat and stuff like that, right? So you can't have, and sewage sludge as fertilizer in this world, but you can't have used any of that if you want it to be called organic. You have to avoid all synthetic chemical inputs. You have to avoid your antibiotics, your pesticides, any additives like preservatives and stuff like that. It has to be totally natural. So that's another thing, right? Use of farmland that has been free from prohibited synthetic chemicals. So that means that if you've been a regular old farmer using pesticides and fertilizers and all that fun stuff on your farm, and then this year you say, you know what, I had a change of heart, I'm going to go organic. You can't, because the land has to be free of that stuff for at least 3 years. So you would have to wait 3 years and plant nothing to become organic. You would have to buy land somewhere that was not farmed on using fertilizers and stuff like that. So that's another check off the list. You need to always keep detailed written records. You need to maintain strict physical separation. What that means is you may have a crop on your farm that's certified organic, but you may be growing other crops too that are not organic. You can't have anything touching, mixing. You can't use the same equipment. You can't store it in the same area. You have to have a physical separation between the field itself. So there's a lot of things you have to do to keep that separate. And then, of course, there are these on-site inspections. The USDA will come in and do these unannounced inspections of your land to make sure you're satisfied all of these things. All right. So that's the process you have to go through to have something considered organic. Slide 13 shows you that there are 3 levels of organic out there. The first two, 100% organic and organic. Notice there's a little round seal next to them, a certification, USDA organic, right? That means that the USDA will grant you these seals to be certified organic if you're at these 2 levels. Now, you don't have to get these seals, but it's very beneficial for agriculture, for a farmer to get these, because it is just absolute proof that you are organic like you say you are. It has been tested, it has been monitored, and you are organic, right? So there's 100% organic, where obviously that's 100% of everything you do is organic. And then there's the term organic, which means 95% or more is proper. All right. So those are the 2. So if you go to the store and you see these seals, it will say 100% organic, or it will just say organic. So you know that there is a portion of that organic that isn't quite. So they may have used one thing. They may have used a fertilizer. They may have used a preservative or something. But 100% organic, they have used nothing. All right. These next 2 levels you have to watch out for, because companies will label things organic and they're not sealed, they're not certified, but they'll say, oh, it's organic. They're allowed to say that because if there's at least 70% of organic ingredients in something, they can call it ingredient. They can call it organic. So you have to be careful about that. And then they can also call it organic if there's less. So they can call something organic from basically nothing organic up to 70%, but there's no seal on it. So that's all sketchy. So if you're really trying to buy organic food, if you're really trying to stay healthy, you look for the seals, and that's truly organic. The reason why people label organic and they're not truly certified organic is because organic food costs more. So they could charge more for their money if they throw some organic ingredients in there and then label it as organic, because you're just going to go and buy it and say, oh yeah, that's why it's more expensive. So you have to be careful about that. Slide 14, slide 15, and slide 16, that was an interactive activity. You do not have to do this. You can do this as a review. I am not collecting this. I am not grading it. I am not doing anything like that. All right. The reason why I'm not giving you anything to do. Now, when you look at the materials, you'll see there's slides, you'll see there's the daily attendance, and you'll see there's a quick exit ticket. So I do want you to do the exit ticket. But the reason I'm not giving you any kind of writing assignment or anything is because we have a quiz next time we meet. You have a quiz next time we meet. So make sure that you are studying. So I'm giving you this time to study and to look over all the things. Again, it is from on the classroom, March 27th, 327 on. All the slideshows are going to be included on that quiz. The quiz is 8 questions. A couple of them have multi-parts, so it comes out to about 12 questions. It is written. It's not multiple choice. It's not fill in the blank. It's short answer type things. One of them is a graph you have to interpret. So it's not too difficult, but it's similar to the tests that we have been taking. Right. So the next time we meet, I will go live for a little while, just in case anybody's here and wants to ask some questions, specific questions. And then I will post the quiz, and you will have time to do it. And I will most likely grade it within 24 to 48 hours. All right. That's all I got to say. Yeah, I didn't have a lot of people watching, and that is okay because I know you guys click on later and you end up viewing it at a later time. So I'm cool with that. That happens a lot with period 5, happens a lot with period 9 as well, I think. But we'll see. I will talk to you guys soon. Have a good day. Study, study, study.